Welcome to the Global Roundtable. This series focuses on the future of economic competition. I'm Parag Khanna, joined by a distinguished panel including Dambisa Moyo, Daniel Altman, and Anand Girdhardas. Today we're talking about the end of the dollar. But is it? The dollar is still obviously the dominant reserve currency, but it does face competition. Clearly we see that the yen, the euro, the RMB, and others are getting ever more play in global currency exchanges. So what is the future of the global monetary system going to look like?
Some people would argue it might not even be a relevant point, but I think if you look at what's going on right now, particularly with the Chinese renminbi, fascinating. They are lending to organizations like the IMF and to other economies in their currency. They're doing swap agreements, trade agreements based on the renminbi. Longer term, the concern is about whether there's actually financial infrastructure developed enough in China to sustain a role as a global reserve currency. But the fact of the matter is that they are the big lender around the world, not just to the West, across Africa, Latin America, Europe, and Australia. And so the fact of the matter is that they will be playing a bigger role and their currency will be greater demand.
Look, with reserves, you can have as many currencies in the basket as you want. People thought the euro was going to be the great alternative to the dollar. Now there are a lot of questions about the euro. If you look at the euro countries' long-term potential to grow and their risks, they could be heading in 4 different directions. But you do need one currency for things like trading oil. That's where the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, wants to step in and offer their own currency, which is a mix of other currencies. But who decides what the mix is? Maybe it's just the IMF trying to reassert its relevance.
Nobody denies that the West is going to lose a certain amount of power, relative power. The big question that remains is, even as it loses that power, can it at least maintain certain kind of mediating roles, like being the reserve currency of the world, being the military that goes into kind of police situations? Even those things are now starting to fall away.
Daniel, just because there should be a standard global currency doesn't mean it has to be one of the existing ones. What about the idea of the IMF special drawing rights, SDRs?
That's a problematic idea because the SDRs are really built as combinations of other currencies. There has to be an exchange rate between the SDRs and other currencies. So you have to know how much they're worth in dollars, euros, etc. But who decides how much of a dollar, how much of a euro, etc. goes into that basket that forms the SDR? That's an extremely powerful decision to be able to make. And I think the IMF, A, wants to be able to make it because they are feeling a little bit irrelevant these days. And B, it's a decision where the IMF's board is going to have a lot of say. And countries like China and Korea, growing economies, are having more and more of a say on that board.
What about the fact that not only can you transition away towards a basket of some kind, but countries have the right to define the basket as they so choose in terms of differing compositions? For example, you're counting out Europe, but there's still many countries buying the euro. And in fact, the Eurozone will actually expand despite everything that's happened, because some of the smaller countries, whether it's Iceland or in Eastern Europe, Balkan countries, they actually still want to join the Eurozone. So we're going to have a multipolar, multi-currency world, whether we like it or not, and it's not necessarily going to be harmonized, standardized, or led by the IMF or anyone else. So is there a way out of that sort of chaos, currency chaos?
I would say that we don't need a way out as long as our computers can keep all the numbers straight. But it does make it a little more difficult for us as consumers and investors to see what we're getting at any time. It means that not only are we going to have to internationalize our portfolios, we're going to have to think a lot more about currency risk when we plan for the future.
And I would just add to that by saying countries are already voting with their feet. I mean, the Chinese government, as an example, has a portfolio, and it's deciding right now whether it wants to put it in euros, whether it wants to hold it in dollars, and we know what the impacts on the markets of those type of decisions are. So I think you'll very much see that sort of nation determination, which is about currency baskets, which is just done at a national level.
That story, as it evolves, is going to have a major impact, of course, on global economic competition. Thanks very much for your insights. More on that and many other relevant topics at bigthink.com.